Okay, so let's just see if I can get to the next slide. Yep, if I can. So what I want to just start out by saying, whatever situation you're in with your thyroid will need iodine, selenium, and iron. So even if you're on levothyroxine, I mean, you may not be on a completely full dose, so you may still have some thyroid function, which I know I have because I take 100 micrograms a day of levothyroxine. So I still need some iodine to make up the rest of what I need. So just these are the things that you may need to be aware about that your thyroid needs. So what is a plant-based diet? Well, there's a few different ways of looking at it. Firstly, you can be vegan, which is you don't eat any animal products whatsoever, or you can be vegetarian. So no meat, no fish, but you do eat milk and you do eat eggs, and they're quite good sources of all sorts of things. Or you could just be plant-based, but having a flexitarian diet, which means that you increase your number of plant-based foods, but occasionally you might have meat or fish or milk or eggs. So generally, I mean, more people probably will move into that category. So the Lancet had a program, well, a review in 2019, which was talking about our current food. I mean, the current sort of system we're in, we call the Anthropocene. That's sort of, where we currently are. And what it was really saying is that we, if we want to have healthy diets from sustainable food systems, that we really need to do something about cutting down the amount of animal food we need. So much of the population are going to increasingly suffer from malnutrition and preventable disease. So what we need to do is decrease our dependence on animal foods and move at least some way towards a plant-based or vegan diet. Not completely vegan, but, I guess that the more you can manage that, the better. But the reason I'm talking to you tonight is to say that if you go on a plant-based diet without sufficient knowledge, you may actually end up with deficiencies of various nutrients and some health effects too. So this is data from 2021, and I couldn't find anything more up to date than this. But at that time, 3% of people in the UK were vegan, and 21% were flexitarian. And milk alternatives, of course, have greatly increased. Sales doubled from 2019 to 2020. And a lot of adults use these, 33% of all adults, and 44% of those aged 25 to 44. That was in 2001, and that's probably gone up since then. So this is the other thing that's happened, and companies have really made a big deal of this, is they're beginning to produce foods that are from plants but look like animal foods, so pretend burgers and so on. So if this is data that's looking for what has changed over the last 8 years or so. Well, it's not quite 8 years. It finished at about 2019. So you can see any plant-based alternatives. Let me see if I can show you. The use of plant-based alternatives has gone up a great deal. The use of meat alternatives has gone up, and the use of plant-based milk has gone up tremendously as well. And this is finishing at 2019. So the proportion of people has gone up from about 6.7% in 2008 to 13% in 2019. So it's gone up a lot, and it's probably gone up since then. And the people who are mostly buying these foods are females, millennials, and those of higher income, because actually they're quite expensive. And a lot of them are, they're sort of, they're the sort of foods that people tend to run down at the moment as largely being produced in factories. They're not really fresh foods. And among people who don't eat a lot of meat, the plant-based alternative food consumption has gone up more than in high meat consumers. So there are some issues with these plant-based diets. This is some data, which is looking at women and adolescents, female adolescents, and how much they have of certain nutrients in their foods. And what you're seeing here is this thing, the lower reference nutrient intake. So, and this is showing the percentage of that various people have. So the lower reference nutrient intake of any nutrient is lower than anybody really wants to be. So you shouldn't be featuring in that graph at all. And you can see that for iron, for instance, female adolescents, there's about, 50% of them are in this lower reference nutrient intake. For adults, it's better, but it's really young women that are most at risk. Okay, so there is certainly evidence that there's already problems, and I'm not talking here, that data is not from women on plant-based diets, it's just from ordinary women. So already quite a lot of these have suboptimal amounts of key nutrients, and this is continuing to happen. So what we're actually seeing is a deficiency of vitamin B12, iodine, iron, calcium, selenium, and long-chain fatty acids, so-called omega-3 fatty acids, which I'll say a bit more about later in case people aren't that clear about those. And there's two main reasons. Basically, plant foods have low or no concentration of some of these nutrients, and the bioavailability of some of them is low or very low. And then there's also evidence of a higher risk of some diseases in vegetarians and vegans. For instance, increased risk of low bone strength, fracture risk, and stroke. So looking now at people who are vegans, so they're not eating any dairy foods at all. So they need to be aware that dairy products, particularly milk, in the UK are the major source of iodine. And some animal-derived proteins are doing other things that people wouldn't think of that can't be supplied by plant proteins. For instance, casein, which is a milk protein, is important for infant bone elongation. And the production of insulin is stimulated by whey protein. Some breakdown products of milk proteins can reduce blood pressure. And certain kinds of amino acids, like leucine from whey protein, can stimulate the formation of muscle protein. So these are things that people wouldn't reckon that milk would do for you, but it does, or milk and dairy products. And this is just one of my staff, somebody who works on iodine with me has made this iodine content of foods. And you can see, if I show you here, these are the plant-based foods. And you can see that basically the plant-based foods have no iodine in them at all. So you're getting iodine from fish or from cow's milk. And people don't like fish that much, so there's not that much fish eaten. So a lot of it's coming from cow's milk. And of course, you can get iodine from seaweeds, but some of the seaweeds that you get and ones that are sold, and particularly sold for iodine content, are things like kelp and kombu. And you can get extraordinarily high levels of iodine from those, and you should be avoiding them. So what I want to describe now is really the difference between intake and status. Intake is what you eat, so it's very straightforward. But status is more important, really, because it's the amount of that nutrient that's in your body, in other words, in your blood, when it's been absorbed, and represents the amount your body can use. And it's represented by biomarkers, like, for instance, the amount in your plasma or something. But status is more important because intake, you can eat food, but it might go out your bottom. I mean, it might go out, you don't necessarily absorb it. So it's much more important to have a good status of certain things. And that's determined, first of all, by your sex, by the existing status of some nutrients. For instance, if you already have a good level of iron, you're not going to absorb any more. Gut transit time. So if you happen to have diarrhea, everything you eat's going to go through you. Lack of stomach acid. Now, it's important. It's especially important in people over the age of 50, when the stomach atrophies and you lose the ability to make much stomach acid. And so that will prevent the absorption of iron and of vitamin B12. Medication can affect your status as well. And then lastly, how much of the food you eat is taken up by other things in the diet, because other things can bind metals like iron, zinc, calcium, and magnesium. And basically, they get absorbed by those things in the diet and you don't get them. They don't go into your body. And this is just, just an idea of some of the things that bind iron, zinc, and calcium. Calcium, for instance, binds to oxalate, which is in quite a few foods. And I'm not sure if you can see it. It's on the right of the screen. There's a big molecule called tannin, which you get from tea. And that's very good at absorbing iron. So if you're eating tea at the same time as a cereal, breakfast cereal with iron in it, you won't absorb the iron very well. Okay, so that's so what I'm going to go on to talk about is some studies that looked at intake or status. And what I'm really going to say is status is more important than just intake. So this was a series of studies run by these people in the Netherlands. And they looked at 141 different studies all over the world. And they put them together to show just what people were actually managing to either consume or what their status was. So this was really, these were some graphs looking at vitamin B12 and iodine. So this one is vitamin B12, as you see on that left-hand axis. I'm trying to, here we are, the left-hand axis. And so they're all showing meat eaters, vegans, and vegetarians. And this green line is telling you the estimated average requirement for adults. And the estimated average requirement is enough for half the people in the group. So not everybody. So as you can see, meat eaters are fine for vitamin B12, but vegans and vegetarians are not. And then the same is true for iodine. You're seeing, reasonable amounts in meat eaters and less in vegetarians and vegans. This green line again is showing you what you need, what half the people in the group need or half the people in the country need. But if you look at this red line here, this is showing you what's required in pregnancy. So when you become pregnant, your need for iodine goes up very markedly. So unless you're a meat eater, you're not necessarily a meat eater, but unless you eat animal foods, you're not going to have enough iodine in pregnancy unless you take a supplement. And this is data from, I think I've lost this. No, it's all right. I can't see the thing at the top. You can see it, but I can't. This is talking about the amounts of food in certain diets. I think these were German diets. Oh no, this was the same one. Sorry. This is EPA, icosapentaenoic acid, and DHA. These are N3 fatty acids, long chain N3 fatty acids. And I mean, there is no special level of them, but you can see that people eating animal foods are doing much better than vegans and vegetarians. And then this is the one from Eastern Germany, which is showing how much people take in. So again, we're looking at the people who eat everything, flexitarians who eat quite a lot of plant foods, but not completely, vegetarians and vegans. And if we just look, all I'm doing here is comparing those different categories. So if you look at B12, you're going in an omnivore, then a vegetarian, and then a vegan. And you can see that the levels drop as you move from omnivore down to vegan. The same is true for vitamin D. The same is true for calcium. And the same is true for zinc. So the intake is going down in all those cases. Now, this one is showing status. So this is the way you measure how much of different things you have. So we're looking first at B12 deficiency. And again, so this is a measure of what B12 there is in your blood. And it's moving from 0.34 to 0.02 and 0.08. Ferritin, that's the way you measure the amount of iron your body can use. And again, it's going down as you go from omnivore to vegetarian to vegan. Selenium is going down. Zinc is going down. That's for males and females. And iodine is going down. So this is status. This is what your body actually has, not just what you've eaten. And then this was another German study, and what we're looking at here is the proportion of people in this study that have a vitamin and mineral intake below recommendations. So that's showing what percent of the subgroup have vitamin or mineral intake less than they should have. So the higher levels are bad. So this is saying you've got high levels of people who don't have enough B12, don't have enough calcium, don't have enough iodine. So it's clear that these things need to be improved. The intake of those need to be improved. And actually that people who are strict vegans, those are the ones in the gray, should take supplements that contain those vitamins and minerals. And nearly a quarter of people in that study were classified as underweight. So total energy and protein intake need to be improved as well. Now, this is data from a very nice study which is run in Oxford. There is a group called EPIC, which collects data all over Europe, and there's a branch of it in Oxford. And the Oxford cohort has tried to recruit a lot of vegans and vegetarians, and it's actually run by a vegan. And so there are really good data from that group on quite a lot of vegans. And what they were looking at here was the B12 data. So they had over 200 of these different people with different types of diet. And if you look at the graph, you can see the vegans are down here in terms of their serum B12. Vegetarians are better, and omnivores are best of all. So what they found was 52% of the vegans were vitamin B12 deficient and would have a higher risk of developing clinical symptoms related to B12 deficiency. And this is just very quickly to show you what those signs are. Basically, today, I'm not going through all the signs of deficiencies because anything that has a recommended level is something you're supposed to have enough of. So it would, it would take me at least another hour or two to talk to you about deficiencies, but those are just, it's a little sort of summary of symptoms of B12 deficiency. This is data about selenium. And again, this is from a German study. So theoretically, this is the amount of selenium you should have within that red range. And you can see that when you get to the vegans, there are quite a few vegans that are below that reference range. And this is a marker of selenium over here, which I won't go into, but it's the same sort of range that as you go down, you have less selenium. Okay, so for a number of minerals, it's not so much the amount of mineral in a plant food, but it's bioavailability. And bioavailability is how much of that food you get into your body. So even though you eat it, it's how much can you use. So how much of the plant food do you eat, do you absorb, or are available for your body to use? And so that is this issue of bioavailability. So I mentioned it earlier, many minerals and trace elements are inefficiently absorbed, but that varies with the element. And often with its speciation, that just means the type of compound. So you could have iron, which is heme iron, in other words, the kind of iron you get in animal foods. Or you could have inorganic iron, like, can't think of an example, but the sort of iron you'd get in plant foods, which is not heme iron, because heme iron only comes from animals. So it depends on that type.
We appear to have lost Professor. Hold on one moment and I will see if I can get her back. Bear with me. Go.
Okay, so if I go from current slide, right, and then I want to see the whole thing. Let me see if I can do it.
Are you okay? Do you need
I'm
me
trying to, yeah,
improve?
I can only see that a small bit of screen. I don't know, maybe this is bigger. No, it's not that. Go away. Not that.
No, if we go to the display settings.
Yeah, I know, but I can't see them. There's a little bit of stuff at the top of my screen that means that I can't see them. And I don't know how to remove that. Let me just try again. I've tried that. That's no good. No, I don't want that. More options, right. Hide presenter view. That's a bit better. But it's
There
not,
we go.
it's
I was
not
going
big
to
enough.
say, so can you not see that, Margaret?
I can see it, but it's not taking the whole screen. It's this, I mean, you can't see this bar, but I usually try and get rid of it. But I don't know if, let me press OK. Right, now,
Because we can see, I
can
think,
you
everything
see?
that's on your slide. Yeah.
All right, well, let's just go with that and hopefully it's okay. So really all this was telling you was that these women, especially the ones up to 50, were low in various measures of iron. That's effectively all it tells you. And then this is looking at zinc, as far as I remember, in human studies. Now, I can't see this terribly well. Let me move those out of the way. This green line down here, anybody to the left of that green line, any of these points, these are all different studies, means that there's less zinc in vegetarians and vegans. Anybody on the right means there's more zinc there. So basically what this is really telling you is that serum zinc, you know, what's in your serum, is less if you're a vegetarian or a vegan. And the green line means there's no difference in the means between vegetarians and non-vegetarians. That's effectively what it means. So, and that's the sort of overall effect, which means that basically if you take all these studies together, this is the answer you get. So you're down on this negative side. Right, so this is really just to summarize what I've told you, which is we're looking at low intake or status of different nutrients in vegan or vegetarian diets. And if we look at the nutritional component, things that are missing are vitamin B12, iodine, well, vitamin B12, you have to get it from animal foods, iodine, fish, seafood, and dairy products. You can get it from seaweed, but it may be in excessive amounts. If you get it from nori, you know, the seaweed that you get in Japanese diets, that's fine. But kelp or kombu will be absolutely full of too much iodine. Heme iron, which you get in animal products, you won't be having that in any vegetable foods. And then these long chain polyunsaturated acids, fatty acids, you only get from fish or shellfish. Then, so what's deficient? Vitamin D will be deficient because you can get it from oily fish, although you can make it from sunlight on the skin. And selenium, you get that from Brazil nuts. But again, it's a little bit like seaweed. You can get, if you eat if you use Brazil nuts as your daily way of taking selenium, you could find that you're over the top. You could get excessive amounts of selenium. So it's not a way to take extra selenium. And then these are the ones that are present but difficult to absorb because they come from the hulls of seeds and nuts and grains. And that's the phytate, oxalates and polyphenols. All these things are binding iron, zinc, calcium, and magnesium. So these are the ones you're going to have to worry about, these things that are missing or deficient. So looking now at what happens to your health. So there's problems with oh yeah, I forgot about this. I should do this first. This is just explaining a little bit. It's just explaining a little bit of essential fatty acids. So normally you would get you can get alpha linolenic acid found in many seeds and oils. So flaxseed, walnuts, all those things are going to have lots of this. But this is not going to do you any good. You actually want to go all the way down to these ones at the bottom. The ones at the bottom are EPA and DHA. And your body, most people's bodies can't do that reaction. Women can do it a bit better than men, but mostly you might get to EPA, a bit of it, but you won't get to DHA. And DHA is crucial in children and people who are people who are pregnant really need DHA. It's really crucial for babies. So EPA is good for cardiovascular diseases. DHA is good for the brain and eyes. EPA is anti-inflammatory. So the only way you're going to get these is from oily fish or from fish oil capsules. But actually you can get algal oil, from algae and seaweed. It costs more, but you can get that. So if you're vegan, you can eat algal oil. But that's a sort of, I just wanted to be sure that you understood the difference between flax seeds, these N-3, the short, well, they are long chain, but that these are not at all equivalent to EPA and DHA. And this is what happens to you if you don't have enough DHA and EPA. These are all the different problems that you may have. I'll just pick a few out. One is symptoms of ADHD in children. Age-related mental decline, Alzheimer's, dementia. Risk factors for heart disease. And they're especially important in pregnant women for transfer to the baby, for the brains and eyes of infants and children, and all these other things. So, I mean, the reason I put that figure in about the essential fatty acids is people might not realize that you need these really long chain ones to do you any good. This is what happens if you don't have enough iodine in pregnancy. This is a study that I did. And what we've got here is children, this is data on children from women who didn't have enough iodine in pregnancy. And they were more likely to have lower IQ scores. So we're looking here in these children at verbal IQ, total IQ, reading accuracy, and reading comprehension. And this is the iodine to creatinine ratio. So it's telling you, how much iodine you have. And these were samples taken from women during pregnancy. And IQ is best when people have a full complement of iodine. And the worse your iodine, the lower your score of IQ when you're 8 or 9. That's really what this is telling you. So what it really says is you absolutely have to have enough iodine when you're pregnant. And this, I will have shown this when I talked about what you need for the thyroid. This is some data that I was involved in from China. And it's looking at Xi'an which is sort of central China. And what you're seeing in Xi'an, which is a province, is 2 areas, a low selenium area and a high selenium area. And this is just showing what is the thyroid disease in these 2 areas. And in the higher area, this was the amount of selenium they had in their blood, as opposed to the low area where they had half that amount. And if you look at the different thyroid conditions, they're all much better in this high selenium area. So if you look at autoimmune thyroiditis or Hashimoto's disease, your risk of getting it was only 0.47, or in other words, half of it, if you were in the high selenium area rather than the low selenium area. And this has been followed up ever since. So low selenium status is associated with the risk of thyroid disease. This is some other work I've done, which was, this was looking at COVID-19. And what we've got here is the selenium status in cities in China during COVID-19. And this is the selenium status plotted here against the cure rate from COVID-19 or SARS-CoV-2. And you can see the higher your selenium was, this was measured selenium in hair, the higher it was, the higher your cure rate was. And I'm still working on that sort of that area still. Right. So now we're looking at what happens to bones. And this is data from Epic Oxford, that group that's got lots of vegetarians and vegans in. And this is what's called a forest plot. So down the middle is what happens if there's no difference. You know, if you're comparing vegans to vegetarians, actually what we're looking at here is meat eaters, fish eaters, vegetarians, and vegans. So that's what we're comparing all the way down. And we're looking at different fractures. But if you look at this one here, you've got leg fractures here. No, sorry, hip fractures. Hip fractures, this is meat eaters. And if everybody's compared to that, this is where the vegans fall. Much, much higher risk, 2.31 times the risk of a hip fracture. The same is true for other fractures, for total fractures, for leg fractures, and for other main fractures. So it certainly affects your ability to, well, not to break a leg or something, if you're a vegan or a vegetarian. So these were, yeah, vegetarians here and vegans. Moving from vegetarian, because if you think of it, if you're vegetarian, you're probably drinking milk or dairy products. Vegans are not. So there is a difference between vegetarians and vegans in this. And this is some other data, which is also very interesting. So again, we're looking at meat eaters, fish eaters, and vegetarians. And vegans are inside the vegetarian group. And what you're seeing here is, if you look at this green box, we're looking at ischemic heart disease. That's sort of typically just heart disease. And here you're seeing, if this is the meat eaters, they're in the middle. And if you compare that, your vegetarians are doing much better. They've got 0.78, well, you know, sort of 3/4 of the risk of people who eat meat in terms of developing heart disease. So they're doing much better. They're doing a bit better for myocardial infarction, but it's not significant. However, when we then begin to look at, oh, sorry, go back. We need to look at this. We're now going to look at hemorrhagic stroke. And here you see the opposite. You see that if you're a vegan, or sorry, a vegetarian, your risk is 1.43. In other words, 0.43, or say 43% higher if you're a vegetarian rather than a meat eater, of having hemorrhagic stroke. That's a sort of stroke where you bleed into the brain. And this is total stroke. And you've still got 20% greater risk of total stroke. So although you gain on the heart disease, you lose out on the stroke. And then finally, I'm not going to take you through all this, but this is really looking at death. So it's all-cause mortality from whatever cause was basically no different in regular meat eaters than in vegetarians or in vegans. And that's what these data are telling you. So even though you do better in terms of heart disease, you do worse in terms of some other things. And overall, it doesn't make a difference. So it's not that it's actually safer to be vegan. There's no difference in the long run. So then if you look at the impacts, just as a graph here, you see you've got a reduced risk of cancer, a reduced risk of obesity, a reduced risk of diabetes and heart disease if you're on a vegetarian or vegan diet. You have an increased risk of fractures, stroke, and nutrient deficiency. And the nutrient deficiency means you lose B12, iodine, etc., etc., and no difference in all-cause mortality. So I want to just say a brief bit about plant milks, because lots of people who are going vegan or starting that way will start with plant milks, and there's loads and loads of them now. So this is just some data from a dietitian who says this is what you should be looking at. And what she's saying, what she's really saying is, you look for some protein in them, because an awful lot of these plant milks have no protein at all. You don't want anything that's sweetened. And ideally, you want one that's fortified, because plant milks, if they're not fortified, there'll be no iodine, no B12, no calcium, no selenium, and no fatty acids or anything in them. And this is just to show the price. This is cow's milk. There's the protein. So the only other milk that has any protein in it is soya. All of these others don't. And the cost in terms of, obviously cow's milk is much cheaper than some of these other milks. And then if you are going to have some of these milks, make sure that it's fortified with iodine, B12, calcium, and anything else you might be worried about. So this is a study we did a while ago, so we wouldn't get the same results now, but we were looking at all these different milks, as opposed to cow's milk. So this is cow's milk here. This is organic cow's milk, which didn't at that time have as much iodine in it. These were all fortified. They were all from Marks and Spencer's, and they were all fortified with iodine. But all these others didn't have anything in them. I mean, there was no iodine, certainly. This is a study we did looking at women who consume milk alternative drinks and women who consumed ordinary cow's milk. So, and this is iodine status along here. And the people who consumed cow's milk, this is a national sample in the UK, they all had enough iodine, but those who consumed alternative milks didn't. And that's not that long ago, that study, when did we, 2020. So, I mean, that's basically coming from the UK National Diet and Nutrition Survey. So I'm just saying, if you're going to go for a plant milk, make sure you've got what these, make sure they're fortified. And remember, if you have an organic milk, it will not have any fortification, and that's got peanuts and water, nothing else. So don't go for an organic milk if you're going to have, go for one that's fortified. This is, I don't want to make too much of this. This is just showing in Germany how many vegans or people were taking supplements in this study that they were doing. And if you look, where have I got it? B12 should be highlighted. Yeah, that's B12 up at the top. So a lot of vegans knew that they didn't have any B12 and they were supplementing with it. The other thing, I think they weren't supplementing with much else. You can see the difference between those who supplemented and those who didn't in terms of B12. There wasn't much difference with iodine or with other things. And that's really all that's explaining to you. So, if you want advice about being vegan, you could go to the Vegan Society website. And the Vegan Society website has a recommended, they have a supplement, and it has a lot of these things in it, and it has some very good articles on B12. I don't know, if you look at this long enough, there'll be a few things that you not see on it. Well, yes, as I say, it's good for B12, but some of the other things you won't see. Fortified foods. So it's telling you where you get B12 and fortified foods. And it's telling you to eat them twice a day and aim for 3 micrograms a day. This is a B12. And it's also telling you how much to take in a week. So it's very strong on telling you to take B12, but there are a few things it hasn't got. There's no mention at all of long chain N-3 fatty acids, the DHA and the EPA. And again, in terms of fortified foods, no mention of those. Now, if you then move from that on to, this is the plant-based Eat Well guide. So this is supposed to tell you what you ought to eat. And I think it's the British, I'm trying to think who it is who produces that. But anyway, it's one of those authorities that produces this. But if you look at it carefully, you can see a few things that are wrong with it. Firstly, it's telling you choose unsweetened calcium and vitamin D fortified versions of a plant milk, but it should be including iodine in there. It's included calcium and vitamin D, no mention of iodine. So that's a mistake. And the other mistake is, this is the fatty acid bit. No mention of the need for these long chain fatty acids, even though they're actually terribly important in pregnancy. One of the things they do is they retain, women who take these in pregnancy have a longer pregnancy, or rather they're less likely to deliver the baby early. And delivering a baby earlier than 37 weeks is a bad idea. It's not good for the baby. So if you want to keep your baby at 40 weeks, you need to take long chain fatty acids in pregnancy. Now, this is something I want to show you. I don't know if you can see it. I'll hold it up. Can you see that little fish? That little fish is, it's been used, people developed this in some PhD studies, and it's a way of actually increasing iron in your food. And this was done in Benin in people who were, who really didn't have enough iron. So these were people who didn't use this iron fish. So, I mean, what you do with the fish is you basically drop it into your, whatever you're cooking. If you're cooking a stew with tomatoes or something, you drop the fish in and you boil it for about 10 minutes or whatever. And then you pull the fish out and wash it and clean it, and you drop it in the next time you do something. Or you can make water, which is fortified with iron. So basically it's an iron fish. And as long as the pH of the dish, as long as it's slightly acidic, with orange, with lemon in it or tomatoes or something, the fish will absorb, will pass into the dish. And that fish will last for 5 years. So there's a very nice book that goes with it that shows you all the different things you can do. So the only thing is, if you buy it, you're effectively buying not just one for yourself, but one for about 50 people in countries where there really isn't enough iron. So you're effectively you're giving money to, it's the Canadian government basically or Canadian, that's where it came from. So effectively you're giving money to countries that really need it. So you will pay 50 euros or something for it. But anyway, it's just a nice idea. I just thought it was nice. Some of my students have managed to buy one. So I think that's probably, is there anything more? Oh yeah, this is the last slide really. So what you miss B12 and what that does, dementia, brain, nervous system. You'll miss iodine. And you know what that's for your thyroid hormones, controls metabolism, growth, and brain development, especially in babies. Heme iron, the most readily absorbed form of iron. Long chain fatty acids that I talked to you about, reduce the risk of cardiovascular diseases, depression, and you need it for your brain and your eyes. And what's deficient is selenium, which is needed for fertility, immunity, anti-cancer, mortality, antiviral, I won't forget that. Iron for red blood cells, energy and work, that it's present in plant foods, but it's difficult to absorb. Calcium, bone health and blood pressure, it's needed for. Zinc, present in over 300 enzymes in the body. And this is why I'm sort of interested in this, because, I'm interested in hoping that the planet stays alive so that my grandchildren and their children and their children's children all stay alive and healthy and well. So basically that's it. That's it. So does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, that was brilliant. Thanks, Margaret. I love the slide at the end. You've got a gorgeous family. We have had quite a few questions, so I'm just gonna fire on through them. Some of them are relating to specifically what we've been talking about tonight, and some of them are just, I think, general questions around diet, nutrition, and being a thyroid patient, if you're happy to answer those to the best of your ability. So I'm going to start with the question of, do thyroid patients need to avoid soya?
Not to my knowledge. I mean, I don't think the need to avoid soya. I don't think they do. I mean, I personally wouldn't be eating soya for any specific reason, but I don't know that they need to avoid it. Somebody else may know that. You know, whoever asked it may have a reason for saying it.
I was going to say, if there is there is anything that anyone would like to contribute, that they put it back in the chat, we can come back to that.
Yeah.
What's the best way to maintain food ferritin levels as a vegetarian or a vegan?
Food iron, you mean? Food
Yeah.
ferritin is what you make in your body if you have excess iron. You store it as ferritin. I think, I think there are a few things you can do when you're eating something that has iron in it, which isn't animal iron, so it's plant iron. If you take it along with something like orange juice or something acidic, anything acidic, tomatoes, things like that, will help it to be absorbed, because it will change the form of the ferritin from iron 3 to iron 2, and it's better absorbed. So you want to have it with something that's a bit acidic. So fruit, for instance, or anything that's a bit fruity or a bit acidic will help.
Okay, excellent, thank you. Are you aware of, or could you give any examples of a nutritionally balanced meal idea for someone who is a vegan, vegetarian, and perhaps a thyroid patient, to help with the things that you mentioned that are good for your thyroid, like the selenium and?
Well, I mean, I'm not saying don't eat selenium, but just say don't keep eating it like a pill is
Yeah.
one way to do it. So selenium, largely, you know, most selenium that you usually get from seafood, and people are not going to be having that.
Yeah.
So I guess one of the things that we do at home, we make a fruit crumble, something like apple crumble. And in the top of the crumble, with the crumble mix, put a few Brazil nuts in. And then you'll get your selenium from those Brazil nuts, but you wouldn't be doing it every day. You see what I mean? But I mean, it actually makes it really delicious because it's a nice taste.
I was going to say, sounds great to me. I love it. I love a crumble.
I love a crumble, exactly. But I mean, if you put if you have it once, well, you wouldn't have it once a week, but if you put some nuts in it, you know, half a dozen nuts or something, that would be fine. That would be fine. But you won't be doing it every day, is what I mean. Otherwise, I guess I mean, there are some slides available which I haven't shown you, but if you can try and avoid too many sources of phytate, or if you're having, let's say you're having a breakfast that's got iron in it, you know, it's fortified with iron, so it's a cereal. So if you have that with orange juice and don't have it with tea, then you'll absorb more iron. If you have it with the tea will bind the iron. So you don't want to do that. So if you're having fortified foods and you have it with orange juice, that would do it. Or with an apple, something that's acidic. An apple will be acidic.
Okay, and I suppose the same principle could be applied to other meals of the day, in terms of if you're making salads and things like that. If you're putting spinach with something, you could put a fruit in there as well to maybe help.
Well, yes. I mean, going to the point of saying what foods would be good.
Specifically.
Yeah, I mean, it can be done. And I did think about, well, I haven't done it, but I did think about getting some of my students together and producing a cookbook. And then that would have typical, you know, what would be typical things to eat, which would be healthy and would give you, you know, that would, anyway, I haven't done it. It'll be a massive amount of work.
I was going to say, it sounds like there might be a market for it though, Margaret.
I think there might be. I mean, I have got 3 books already, you know, but the last 2 were really a sort of were a diet based on, first one was not to get prostate cancer, and the second one was on dementia. It's a hell of a lot of work, you know, to produce those and try to get the recipes tried out and so on. And with this one, I mean, what I would say is definitely use fortified milk. If you're not going to drink cow's milk or any dairy products, use those fortified milks. That will help you a lot if you just are careful what milk you buy. You know, just be careful and don't buy anything. Don't buy organic fortified milk, because there'd be nothing in it, other than just a bit of, well, not very much in it really. And you pay quite a lot for it.
Okay, that's great. It would be interesting if you're able to pass comment on this, where somebody has asked about low-calorie diets and fasting and how they impact thyroid patients, if that's something that you guys have looked at all.
No, I haven't looked at that. I mean, in general, fasting people like the idea of spending 18 hours. You have your meal at, say, 6 o'clock one evening, and then you don't eat or drink anything, not even, tea with milk or anything like that, for 18 hours. So you wait till after, till your lunch the next day. People do that, and people seem to find that very satisfactory as a weight loss thing, because it seems that you can almost eat what you want the rest of the time if you do that 18 hours fasting. I mean, I haven't done it, so I can't say. But
no, I think I would very
fasting is,
crazy.
lots of people do it and people like it, and it just depends what sort of life you've got and whether it suits you or not.
Okay. And what about thyroid patients avoiding gluten?
I don't think, in my opinion, there's no reason for thyroid patients to avoid gluten any more than anybody else. Although, having said that, that's maybe not true, because if you're a thyroid patient like me, so you've got it's an autoimmune condition, my condition, hypothyroidism, it's autoimmune. And normally, if you have one autoimmune condition, you're quite likely to have another one. In my case, rheumatoid arthritis. And now I come to think of it, gluten intolerance, celiac disease, is another condition where you couldn't tolerate gluten. So probably it falls into that group of intolerant conditions. And so, but you might not have that issue. I mean, I can tolerate gluten without any problem, but some people might not. So it just depends whether you're, whether that's one of the issues you have in your intolerant behavior, whether it's gluten or not. So I wouldn't say, I would say it's probably slightly more likely than for people in general, but I wouldn't say it's definite. You need to find out yourself.
I was going to say, so try it and see if you feel better for excluding it, possibly.
Yes.
Should thyroid patients take iodine supplements, and do we need to test low iodine first?
How do you mean low? I don't know what they mean, but
so I think what the question's asking is, just generally, do thyroid patients need to take an iodine supplement?
No. Well, I mean, I think if you're hypothyroid, you're not making enough, you're not using your iodine properly. So and if you're like me, let's say I take 100 micrograms or something a day. Well, maybe my thyroid, if it were not functioning at all, I'd need 200 micrograms a day. So I need to make up that other 100 micrograms of thyroid, of thyroid hormone. So I'm going to need some iodine to do that. But in my case, it's not an issue, because I use dairy products. So, but I would have said, if you're a thyroid patient and you're not eating milk, I mean, you're not taking milk or anything, then buy a milk replacement that's got iodine in it. I wouldn't say you would go and take an iodine supplement per se. I don't think so.
You broke up a little bit there, Margaret. Sorry, we lost you.
Well, I don't think I would take an iodine supplement, but I think if I weren't taking milk or dairy products, I would definitely make sure that whatever I substituted for them had iodine in it.
Yeah. Okay. And I suppose that leads to the next question, with how do you know whether you're getting enough key minerals and nutrients in your diet, other than obviously having a blood test to find out, what your B12 levels are? I mean, would you, I'm guessing if you had enough, you wouldn't be symptomatic, or?
Well, I think the B12 business, a number of the B vitamins, B12, B6 and folate are absolutely vital for brain function. In other words, if you don't have enough of those, you'll raise whatever it is in the I've forgotten the word. Basically, you've got to have enough of those. Now, the problem is once you get over 50, according to the Institute of Medicine in the United States, and that's a sort of, a major government body, if you like, once you get over 50, you may not be able to absorb enough B12 because you need acid in your stomach to absorb it. And as you get older, your stomach atrophies and you don't make as much hydrochloric acid in the stomach, which means you won't absorb as much B12. And so the Institute of Medicine basically says everybody over the age of 50 should be taking some B12. And I'm a good bit over 50, so I take a B complex supplement every day, which means you're taking you're taking all the Bs together. Now, if you're a vegan or a vegetarian, you'll be getting lots of folate from your diet, but you won't be getting B12. So, you might just want to take B12 if you're vegetarian or vegan. But if you're also over 50, maybe taking a B supplement, all the Bs together, B complex, is not a bad idea. But just remember that if you are on a vegan or vegetarian diet, you will be getting quite a lot of folate. So, you want to keep the B vitamins at a reasonable sort of level, one to the other. If you're already getting a lot of folate, you may not want to take a B complex because it will have extra folate in it. You might just want B12.
Okay. And in your terminology of meat eaters, does that include pescatarians?
I think some of those studies showed fish eaters separately. So it would be people who might not eat meat but would eat fish. I think eating fish I don't happen to like fish, but it's basically a very good idea. Fish or shellfish, those kinds of things. I mean, the problem is there's not really enough in the world to go around, but eating fish and shellfish is without eating meat is a very good idea. If but as I say, there's a problem of there aren't sufficient fish in the world. And what we eat now, they're nearly all farmed. And to get a kilo of a farmed fish out, you have to feed it with something just over a kilo of teeny weeny fish to feed it so that it can grow. So it's a bit of an issue. And there are various organizations that can help you buy fish that you can eat with a clear conscience.
Yeah, sustainably.
Yes, sustainably, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. I have a question actually, which is, why are vegetarians and vegans at a higher risk of stroke?
Nobody really knows.
Oh, okay. Okay, not the answer I was hoping for.
Actually, I mean, in the article that I've written, which I'm waiting to hear about, one of the reasons was that there's a high risk of stroke in certain parts of the world. One place was Japan, and it was thought to be there was less protein in what they were eating. The other place is some parts of China where they have a high risk of hemorrhagic stroke. But in the UK, our risk of stroke is mostly, what's the other word? The stroke where your veins and arteries are blocked up.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's a different, it's not where you're bleeding out into the brain, which is hemorrhagic stroke. So for us, hemorrhagic stroke is much less common. But because there's a big difference for the risk of hemorrhagic stroke. If you look at stroke overall, there's a difference between people on, in vegan or vegetarian diets. So it's a tricky one, but nobody really knows for sure. It was thought that it was something to do with protein, but I'm not even sure. At least that was what was surmised, but I don't even know if that's proved.
Okay. Well, that's all very interesting. I think I'm just going to check that I've asked all the questions that are on the chat. And if anyone has anything further that they'd like to ask, then by all means, please pop it in before we call it an evening. But no, I think can't see that. I think that's everything that everybody's asking that we've gone through. I know a couple of people were asking about sharing of slides, etc. So
But
like
I
I said,
think, yeah, we discussed that. So when when I get my, I mean, my paper, when it gets published, has a big table basically saying what you should do for each nutrient. If you're going to be on a vegan or vegetarian diet, it tells you either what supplements to take or what fortified foods to take. It tells you what you should do in fair detail, you know, and that's quite, you know, I mean, it took me ages to write it, so I'm not good, you know, it's just not possible to share all that in a 40-minute presentation or 50 minutes or whatever it was.
I appreciate that. Well, what we've discussed is, and just to share with the group, is that we will share this recording and information as regards to this evening's speech once Professor Raymond's has been published, papers have been published, and we'll also do a link to the paper so that people that find that information will be able to
read it.
Read it and find that resource.
Yeah,
so
and I think the thing is the paper has, you know, there's a lot in it. I mean, there's a lot more in it than what I was able to say today. So I think it would be, I mean, bits of it might be tough to read, but I think there's enough in it that people will understand.
Yeah.
You know,
well,
yeah.
It will be a great resource. So we're very grateful to you for that and for sharing your time with us this evening and giving up some of your Tuesday evening to talk to us all. So thank you very much again. It's lovely to have you as a guest, and you know, we'd love to have you back again sometime. So lots of people saying thank you so much and sharing your knowledge and research with us. It's greatly appreciated.
Well, yeah, and what I'd like people to do is just tell other people, you know, just say, okay, if you're going to be a vegan or a vegetarian, can you take some advice and, you know, just make sure you're doing the right thing, or go to the Vegan Society, or find out, just, you know, don't fall, you know, don't find that you're not taking the right thing by being ignorant or not finding out about it. It's important to learn. If you're going to do it, you need to do it properly.
Absolutely.
That's what I think, you know.
Great advice. Thank you. Thank you,
All
Margaret.
right,
thank you very much. And thank you very much.
Thank you for turning up.
Oh, yeah. Thank you all very much for attending.
Okay.
Everyone,
Bye-bye.
take care, and we'll hope to see you again soon.